All right, so for this game, it looks like we have what is largely an in and out setup. Basically, there's going to be a bunch of cities that we have to deal with where they're going to host these meetings apparently, and each city is either going to be hosting in the fall or in the spring. So we can set it up accordingly, essentially based on those two options. We have fall at spring, so not literally in and out, but it's the same kind of idea. And then we have these 5 cities. We have H, M, O, T, V. Now, it's worth noting that in this game, they do throw a bit of a curveball in that basically every single one of the 2 different semesters, the fall and the spring, is going to be hosting, or I guess the meetings will be hosted by 3 cities. So there are 3 spaces on each side. And of course, we only have 5 cities to work with. Essentially, what's going to have to happen here is they do tell us that every single city has to host at least one. So everybody does have to show up. So there's really just one extra space. And what that means is that one of these cities is going to show up both in the fall and in the spring. So there's going to be a duplicate. Now, because of that, this isn't quite a textbook. It's not a proper in and out game. And some of the conventions that you might be used to with in and out games, you do want to be cautious about how you apply them because they might not quite work the same way. And you just want to be aware of that. But otherwise, we largely can treat it like an in and out game. So let's go. First rule tells us that if H hosts a meeting in the fall, then M would also host a meeting in the fall. So if we have H in the fall, then we'll have to have M in the fall as well. Now, here, there's a very good chance that you might have run into a bit of trouble. Now, the common approach to contraposing this rule is to essentially say that, well, if M's not in the fall, or in other words, if M is in the spring, then H would also have to be in the spring. And normally that would be fine because there's only 2 possibilities. You're only one or the other, not both. But in this game, you could be both. And that actually gets a little bit messy now. Because here's the thing. The proper contrapositive here, what would it have said? It would have said that if we didn't take the shortcut, if M is not in the fall, then H is not in the fall. But these 2 statements, they don't actually say the same thing. Because if M is not in the fall and saying M is in the spring, since you can be in both in this game, they're not identical sentiments. If you trigger that M is in the spring, that doesn't actually mean that M wasn't in the fall. There could be a situation where M would have been in both, which means triggering that M is in the spring doesn't actually do anything, because by saying that M is in the spring, that wouldn't have allowed you to say that M isn't in the fall. M could have been in the fall as well. So you do want to be cautious here. And the same thing kind of ends up on the other end. Even if M was not in the fall, does that necessarily mean that H would have to go in the spring? And actually it kind of does, doesn't it? Because if M is not in the fall, then H would not have been in the fall. And if H is not in the fall, then yes, H would have been in the spring. But there's still a bit of a pitfall there, which is that saying that H would be in the spring is not really enough. Because saying that H is in the spring, this on its own would allow for H to perhaps also go in the fall, right? Because you could go on both. So that wouldn't be consistent with saying that H is not in the fall. So you need to clarify that not only H is in the spring, but that H is only in the spring, that H wouldn't be in the fall. So because of this discrepancy, it might not be a bad idea to just kind of write these rules without the shortcut here. If you're at all uneasy about whether a shortcut would apply, then you just avoid it altogether. So we'll contrapose this basically to say that if M is not in the fall, then H will not be in the fall. And if you want to, you can kind of clarify here that that would mean that H is in the spring. Next, if V is in the spring, then T would also have to be in the spring. So if we have V in the spring, then you'd also have to have a T there as well. Contrapose, this would essentially, again, you want to be cautious. So we'll say if T is not in the spring, then T will not be in the fall. And again, if you want to clarify, that would also mean that T will be in the spring here. Next, in each semester, either M or V or both would host a meeting. So on both sides, we have to have an M or a V each. And again, since we could have duplicates, that actually could be the same one, right? So yes, we'll leave a placeholder here for M or V, but it could arguably be M on both, or it could arguably be V on both, or a mixture of the two. So we have a little bit of flexibility here. All right, so from there, I guess let's take a look. So the first question here is actually not an exclusion question. It's just a straight local question. But either way, we do the first question first. So we have, if the only meeting that M has is in the spring, so we're going to have Montreal in the spring for this question. But you'll notice that it doesn't just tell us that M is in the spring. It goes further. It tells us that that's the only meeting that Montreal hosts. So just to kind of clarify that, I'll put a circle around the M here just to indicate that it's not just there. It's the only place where M goes. So what does that tell us? Well, first of all, if M is only in the spring, then it's certainly not in the fall. And if M is not in the fall, then H couldn't be in the fall either, which means that H will have to go in the spring. And again, it's not in the fall. So we can even put a circle here to say that H is also only in the spring. I suppose whoever's the other person here, that will have to now be a duplicate. What else can we do? Oh, we can trigger this rule, V, because we know that if M is only in the spring, then V would have to go in the fall because we have to have one of them in the fall. So V is going to have to go here. Now, from there, can we do anything else? Well, actually we could, because this rule right here, we can't really trigger it, can we? Because if V was in the spring, then T would have to be there also. So, and we can't fit there, right? We can't fit a V and a T. So we can't have a V in the spring. V is also a single here. We're only going to have one V in this game. And then we're just left with T and O, I suppose. Oh, actually, wait, we can take that next step, can't we? If we're only left with T and O, then they're both going to have to go in the fall. That much is for sure. And one of them, I suppose, is going to have to go in the spring. One of them is going to be a duplicate. Now notice, T could still be in the spring because having T in the spring doesn't actually in itself trigger anything. So that's still a little bit flexible. So to the question, which of the following now could be true? Answer choice A, H goes in both semesters, and no, we only have one H right now. T goes in both, and yeah, that's potential. Just in case, so let's take a look at the rest. H is only in the fall. Well, no, H is in the spring. O is only in the spring, and no, it could be in the spring, but it's definitely in the fall, so it's not only going to go in the spring. And then T is only in the spring, same problem, because it definitely has to be in the fall. So the best answer for number 12 is B. Next, question number 13. Let's take a look. If O hosts two of the meetings, so if O doubles up, so that's kind of nice. That means that we have no more duplicates. Everybody else is going to just be a single. So what's going to happen now? I suppose we know that, well, if H is in the fall, then that would lock out both of these. Then M will also have to be in the fall. But then if H isn't in the fall, if H goes over here, well, I guess if H goes over here, then V couldn't go in the spring because then we wouldn't be able to trigger another person to go there, so that V would get forced into the fall. So I guess that's something. You know what? Let's see what we can do with what we have. Maybe we can run this mentally. If not, worst case scenario, we can just split the scenarios. We can try H in the fall or H in the spring and see where that takes us. So the question asks, what now must be true? H goes in the fall, and no, it seems like we did just say that H could have gone on either side. T is in the fall. I don't see why that would, I mean, couldn't we easily trigger V and T both to go in the spring, and then H and M could both go here? So yeah, that certainly doesn't have to be true. Answer choice C, M is in the spring. And again, no, we just said we could have easily had H and M over here, and then V and T over there. So there's no reason that had to be true. Answer choice D, H and V are together. Well, that doesn't have to be true either, because we just said we could have had H and M together over here, and then V and T together over there. So that would get rid of answer choice D. Answer choice E, T and V are together. Now, That definitely could happen. But do we necessarily have to have them together? I mean, if we have H and M over here, then obviously V and T are going to be over here. That's easy enough. But what if we didn't? Let's just run the other side. What if we put the H on this side instead? Then what would happen? And, well, I suppose we know that V could not go with H, so V is going to have to be on the other side here in the fall. That much is true. But then as far as M and T are concerned, oh, wait a minute, we know that one of M or V on each side. So if V is over here, then M is going to have to go in the spring, and then T would have to be in the fall. There it is. So V and T actually would end up having to be together no matter what. The best answer to question number 13 is E. And for the record, again, you could have gotten there just by process of elimination. E is the only one that doesn't obviously not have to be true. But yeah, there is the proof for it as well. Anyways, next. Question number 14. So this one is global. We'll come back to this one in a second. Number 15 is global. We'll come back to it in a second. Let's take a look at 16. If T hosts 2 of the meetings, so again, so now if T is our duplicate, which is a nice way to get rid of that. So now everybody else is a single. What does that tell us? Now T going in the spring doesn't actually trigger anything, so we don't know anything about V. We still have to have an M or a V on both sides. And so again, we could trigger the HM rule. And if we have H over here and M over here, then we could have the remainders V and O over there. And since T is already in the spring, that's okay. But again, we don't have to. The H perhaps could go over here, couldn't it? And then arguably M and V could go either way. Again, let's try this out. Maybe we have enough information to answer the question. If not, we can always split scenarios based on that H. So answer choice A. H and V both host meetings in the fall. So could we have H and V both in the fall? Well, no, because if you put an H over here, then we said M would have to go there. So that definitely couldn't happen. B, M and O are both in the fall. Could we have M and O both in the fall? Well, if we put M and O over here, then we're just left with H and V over there, which seems okay, doesn't it? Because if H is on the spring, it doesn't trigger anything, and nothing else really breaks, and we would have an M or a V, so that seems okay. Let's hold on to this for now. Answer choice C, M and V are both in the fall. Can we have M and V both in the fall? Well, no, because we've already got our double, and M and V now are going to have to split between the two sides. It might even be worth leaving a little reminder here. So we can't have M and V both together in this scenario. Answer choice D, M and O are both in the spring. Could we have M and O in the spring? Well, if we put M and O, so this would be M and this would be O, that would leave us, oh no, that's not going to work, because that would leave us with H in the fall, and we can't have, because H has to be with M, so M could not have gone in the spring, so that would not have worked. Answer choice E, M and V are both in the spring. Could we run that? Well, no, same problem as before. M and V can't be together. So that takes care of it. The best answer to question number 16 is B. Next, number 17. If H hosts a meeting in the fall, well, once again, let's see what happens. So if we have H in the fall, well, first of all, we know that M is going to follow along, so that's kind of nice. Now we've taken care of the MV, so that's done. So now we just have one more person here. Now, aside from that, I mean, the only other rule that we have left to play, because we've taken care, well, I guess the MV, we still need to have one of them in the spring, so that's something to keep in mind. But otherwise, the VT rule is the only other thing in play here. So if the V goes in the spring, we could have T in the spring as well. Oh, actually, there it is. So you'll notice that no matter what, T will end up in the spring, won't it? Because if you put the V in the spring, then T will have to go here as well. But then if you put the V in the fall, then it would lock out the fall, and then T would still get stuck in the spring either way. So T would have to be in the spring. I bet there's going to be an answer on that. So the question is, what must be true now? There it is. Answer choice D. T hosts a meeting in the spring. The best answer choice here is D for question number 17. Next, let's go back to the globals. Question number 14. Which of the following cannot be an accurate partial matching? of the cities with the meetings. So these ones are always a bit of an annoying one because they don't give you a complete setup, so you have to kind of fill in the rest of the blanks yourself. But okay, let's see what we can do. First pass is always going to be a little bit more cursory. We'll see if anything sticks out. And then worst case, we can always grind it out. Answer choice A. Can we have Honolulu in the fall with H and V in the spring? So can we have H in the fall, like over here, and then H and V would both go into the spring? I mean, this last scenario, actually, we might be able to swing it, couldn't we? Because if we, in this scenario, couldn't we easily have done that? We could have placed the H over here with V over here, and then the O ends up over here. And that seems easy, right? There's nothing broken here. So, and then V spring leads to T spring, so we're fine. And then we have an M or V on both sides. So answer choice A, this looks like we easily could have done it. So that could be true. Answer choice B, can we have Montreal in the fall with H and T in the spring? Actually, this is beautiful because we've seen that right there. M in the fall with H and T in the spring. That definitely could happen. We can get rid of B. Answer choice C, can we have O in the fall with MT in the spring? So have we seen that yet? Actually, we kind of did, didn't we? So in this scenario, O in the fall with M and T potentially in the spring, that easily could have happened. So we could have gotten rid of answer choice C. Answer choice D, HT in the fall with M in the spring. Could we do H and T in the fall with an M in the spring? Now, we haven't seen that yet. But this scenario almost seems like it might work, no? So if you put an H and a T in the fall, and let's just run it. So if you put an H over here, and then who did we say? An M in the spring. So this would be, let's say, our M. So if we do that, what happens now? We have our duplicate T. So this would have to be a V over here, and then we're just left with an O over here. Does anything break? So we have H fall. Oh no, that does break, doesn't it? Because if we do H fall, okay, so that doesn't seem like it works. But to be fair, it doesn't quite prove that it couldn't work. It's just that one scenario didn't work. Let's just hold on to D for just a moment. Let's take a quick look at answer choice E. Could we do HV in the fall with V in the spring? So if we do H and V in the fall, and we do V in the spring, we also haven't seen that either. Now, let's try that last scenario first. So this one seems like maybe it has a little more potential because we would be triggering something either way, because V in the spring and H in the fall would have a consequence. Let's see what we can do with that. So can we do H and V in the fall while V goes into the spring? Well, if V is in the spring, we know T would have to follow along. So that's taken care of. We have V on both ends, so that's our duplicate, which is kind of nice. And then we just have M to worry about. Well, if H is in the fall, which it is, then M goes over here, and then O goes over here. Actually, I think this works, doesn't it? There's nothing broken. So we have an M or a V on both sides. This actually looks okay. So I suppose that leaves us with D. Now let's see, why couldn't that have worked? This one scenario that we didn't work, but why couldn't it work in general? If we do H and T both in the fall, and we do M in the spring, well, it would follow that if H is in the fall, we'll have to have M in the fall. Oh, there it is. So we have a duplicate M because we have an H in the fall, so we have to have M in the fall. But now we have to put a V in the spring. But if we put a V in the spring, we are also supposed to have T in the spring, and then we have another duplicate. We can't double up the T's as well. So that wouldn't work. Best answer to question number 14 is D. Next, number 15. Which of the following cannot be the group of cities hosting the meetings? Let's take a look. So on either side. So answer choice A. Actually, before we keep going, let me just get rid of this scenario because that didn't actually work, and this scenario because it doesn't actually work. So answer choice A, H, M, and T. Could we have H, M, and T on either side? Well, yes, we've seen that over here. We could have had H, M, and this could have been a T. So answer choice A, that could have worked. We can get rid of it. Answer choice B, can we have H, M, and V on either side. And this, yeah, we've also seen that over here. So that we can get rid of answer choice B. Answer choice C, can we have H, O, and V on either side? Now this we haven't seen, right? So could we do H, O, and V? Well, let's just quickly run it mentally. If we do H and O and V, well, no, on the fall that wouldn't work, because if we have H, O, let's just kind of run this, H, O, and V, then H fall would trigger M fall, and that wouldn't really work. Oh, but on the spring, that also wouldn't work, right? Because if we do H, O, and V over here, then we would have to have the T over there as well, and that wouldn't work either. So that's our answer. Best answer here is C. For the record, though, just in case, the other ones, answer choice D, can we have HTV on either side? And this we haven't, actually, yeah, we have. In this one scenario that we kind of adapted, we could have had HTV together, so that would have been okay. And answer choice E, could we have MOV on either side? And this we haven't really seen. You know what, let's try it out. Can we have M, O, and V together? Well, I suppose they would not go together in the spring, because if you put a V here, you would have had to have a T, so that wouldn't have worked. But could we have run them together on the fall? And yeah, why not? Because if the rest are what? We have H, we have T, which don't trigger anything if they're in the spring, and then we just need a duplicate. And I mean, for example, if we use, well, I guess we have to use one of M or V, but we could use V, for example, because if you have V in the spring, then you'll have to have T, which we already do. And yeah, everybody's happy, so that could have worked. Either way, the best answer to number 15 is C.